Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting adventure of For the Glory of God and Kings, reading the Bible for the first time again. I am Travis Finley, and it is a beautiful day here in Maryland. It has been stiflingly hot, and so some of my last episodes were in the house, but it's a beautiful morning, and the cicadas are not too loud as of yet, but you can hear them in the background, I'm sure. I hope that some of these videos are well, not some of them, all of them actually. I hope that they are and have been and will be helpful to you as we go on this adventure to read the Bible again for the first time and start to slow down and notice that there's more to the biblical text than what's on the surface because it's intentional. And I had a friend of mine make a comment in a private message to talk about um, the view that we have as Christians on inspiration. And um, when we talk about inspiration, we talk about the fact that God is superintending the uh, orchestration and the organization and the presentation of the biblical text, but that there's also a human author involved as well. So there's a supernatural element and there is a natural element. And um, inspiration is that idea that God is involved in the process of presenting the biblical material in the form that we have it right now. And um, the question becomes, when a biblical author is writing what he writes, is he fully aware of what he's doing? Is he fully aware of the material that he's presenting? Or is it possible that he is writing what he writes and he's not aware that there's something deeper, uh, so that it's almost it's almost a miracle. It's almost miraculous that the end product is what it is. So that if it's almost as if um, the author writes what he's writing, but he's not aware that God is also doing something that the author's not aware of. That's a question that you could ask. I don't think that's what happens. I think the author is fully aware of the material that he presents, and that he is the one presenting it in such a way that there is a deeper um, meaning in the text. Um, so I'm not sure if that's as good of a job as I could do, Jace, but that's what's in my mind without a script right now. So here's what he and I were talking about. We were talking about when I made the comment that in the third chapter of John, when we look and see that Nicodemus comes to Jesus by night. So the author, the human author, is writing that's a fact down. He writes that fact. Nicodemus came to Jesus by night. That is the historical fact. Is the author aware of the deeper implications of that, the theological significance of the picture that the Old Testament is in darkness, moving toward the light of the world, which is Jesus? Is John aware of that? Or is he just writing this down and God is supernaturally having him write that material down so that you and I can read it and figure it out? But John wasn't aware of it. I don't think that's the case. I think that John and all of the authors of Scripture know exactly what they're doing. They are artists, they are craftsmen, they are authors who know how to construct their argument. I don't know if you've ever thought about this or not, And I'm going to say it this way because it's profound enough to make sense. Every part of Scripture is propaganda. John tells us at the end of the Gospel of John that he has written all of what he wrote to persuade the reader of the person and work of Jesus Christ. That's propaganda. That's what I mean. He is presenting you with material in order for you to believe and be persuaded of what he's writing down. Just take that to every single passage in Scripture. All of the Bible is propaganda. It is trying to present material to you in order for you to change your mind about something and then bring your mind into line with what the Scriptures are revealing. So that is a bit of fleshing out of what I'm trying to present to you, that there is something deeper going on than simply what's on the surface. What's on the surface we see happened in history, had historical people, historical events, but those events and people in history are then presented in such a way that it is for a purpose. It is for a it's moving toward a goal. It's an argument that is trying to prove its premise. Okay? And I think we can see that when we look at the four Gospels. The four Gospels are, well, the first three, the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are very, very similar and yet very different. One has two of them have the same account, and yet there's something different about that account, either in the placement in the Gospels as a whole or in the events themselves. There might be something that the author is leaving out or emphasizing in his presentation of the material to make a theological point about the person and work of Christ. So I want you to think along those lines as we read the Scriptures. And one of the things, again, that I'm saying is that the Scriptures present their material over and over and over again in patterns and in echoes and in repetitions. And so we need to be familiar with the language that the Scriptures are using. Not just the language of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, but the language of typology, the language of symbol, so that those ideas make sense. Okay? So I thought that I would try to discuss the biblical worldview of cosmic powers representing people, representing nations, because it is a ginormous theme in the Bible. When God calls Abram out of Ur of the Chaldees and tells him to go into Canaan, God makes promises to Abraham. And one of those promises, he says, go out of your tent and look up into the sky and count the stars. That is what your descendants are going to be like. And then he says, look at the sand in the seashore. Count how many grains of sand there are. That's how many descendants you are going to be. You're going to have. It's been noted that the verb to count the stars, count the sand. It's been noted that that verb in Hebrew can also connote the idea of consider. Look at and consider. Count this as my favor to you. You see how I use the word count? Count this as my paying off your debt. Consider. So when God calls Abram to consider the stars, God is making an analogy. Your descendants are going to be like heavenly bodies. And if we recall going back to Genesis chapter 1, the heavenly bodies are governors over times and festivals and days and years. And then he also says the same thing about the seashore. Consider the seashore. Your descendants are going to be like the earth, like the land. So then you have these two reference points, heaven and earth. Heaven and earth. And those two symbols then represent people in a certain capacity. So go with me then a little bit into the future to Abraham's grandson, Joseph, who has a dream. He has a dream that the sun, the moon, and the stars bow down to him. And he tells his family. He goes and he tells his dad, "Hey, Dad, I had this really weird dream last night. The sun and the moon and the stars, they bowed down to me." And his father didn't say, "Oh, that's a really weird dream, son. What did you have to eat last night? Was it the pizza?" The pizza was probably talking to you, buddy. His father said, "Am I going to bow down to you? Is your mother going to bow? Are your brothers going to bow down to you?" You see what happened? Joseph's father didn't even bat an eye to associate the sun and the moon and the stars with him, his wife, and the other brothers. So the heavenly bodies represent people. Joseph had another dream, and he went and told his brothers. And he said to his brothers, "I had a dream, and we were bringing in the sheaves. And we stacked our sheaves up, and your sheaves bowed down to me." His brothers said, "Are we gonna bow down to you?" "I don't think so." The brothers saw and understood that Joseph's dream meant that they were going to bow down to him. In both of those dreams, we have the heavens and the earth represented. It's those kinds of details that we need to pay attention to. They're not just superficial. So it's not just his dream that I'm highlighting. It's the way the Bible speaks about the heavens and the earth. The heavens the heavens and the earth are, in biblical symbolism, people, nations. And we will look in another episode at that reality in a little bit more detail, and then consider Genesis chapter 1 in that light. So please subscribe and like and comment. I really want this to be helpful. I really want this to be a benefit to you, and so I would appreciate that kind of feedback. And until next time, I'm Travis Finley, and this is For the Glory of God and Kings, reading the Bible for the first time. Again, this cat is bothering me.